In 1971, I was 16 and the deputy head boy of a Catholic boarding school in Tasmania. One night, two much younger boys, maybe 12 or 13, came to see me and the school captain in a highly emotional state. I will call one of the boys the reporter and the other the victim. The reporter named a priest and said, "Look what he has done." The priest had ejaculated on the victim's back. The head prefect, myself, and one other senior boy went and told the rector, and the priest was shipped interstate. At university, I did a law degree. I knew what I had seen that night in 1971 was evidence, not hearsay, and I always thought one day it would return to me. Sure enough, 30-odd years later, it did. I got a call from the police station in the town where I'd gone to school, asking me if I had anything to say in relation to allegations of sexual misconduct at my old school in that particular year. I had long ago made up my mind about what I was going to do if ever I was contacted. The trauma of the boy that night, he was shaking uncontrollably, was like I later saw in car accident victims. Over the years, I had thought of contacting him to offer some message of support, but my experiences as a journalist, in particular a story to do with a serial rapist, had taught me not to make assumptions about the way people pattern sexual traumas of this kind into their lives. You might be reminding them of something they don't wish to be reminded of. They might not have told their family, their partner, their wife, their mates. But when the police rang, I was untroubled to say I was happy to provide a statement, which I did. The hardest thing was being certain of my memory of the incident. I replayed it again and again in my mind. In the end, the one thing I could say for certain was that my memory of the event never altered, and that was what I was going to say if asked in court. I am not a creature who can hide his doubts. They emerge like demons at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then the long dark night begins. But about this, I never had any doubt, and I invited them to appear. I never had that other moment either, the one when you suddenly remember something relevant to the whole case that you'd otherwise forgotten, that throws a different light on the matter. Because I had a law degree at university, I also knew the prohibition against witnesses colluding. The temptation was to ring the boy who had been the school captain and check my evidence against his. But I didn't do that. Then I learned that another former student was also giving evidence for the prosecution. That bothered me. I didn't remember that individual being present. Let's call him the third witness. My great good fortune in the whole affair is that I had told one of my older brothers, Tim Flanagan, about the incident when it occurred. He believed me. My mother didn't. My father listened but said nothing. This didn't bother me. At the time, my mother and I were fiercely at war over religion. I didn't expect her to believe me because it was totally outside the orbit of her experience. But after I'd made the statement I intended giving to the police, I rang my brother Tim and read it to him. He said, "Well, that's what you told me when you were 16. That gave me strength. To be frank, my training as a journalist also helped me in making my statement. I understand what it means to make public utterances and then have to stand by them. I also wanted to say exactly what I had to say and nothing more. I found a peculiar relief in the fact that I didn't have to judge the priest or sentence him. I merely had to give my testimony. This realisation actually gave me more respect for the legal system. It distributes the load of criminal justice, which for anyone with sensitive shoulders is a very big load. Being part of a process that can send a man to prison and destroy his reputation forever is no small matter. Meanwhile, my mother and father, by now very old people, were strongly supportive of me testifying. I was reminded that I wasn't acting purely on my own behalf. The priest was sentenced to 2 years' imprisonment. After the trial, standing outside the courthouse, I met the victim. He didn't seem to me to want to have a conversation about the incident. but I did say I'd never forgotten him or what had happened. I also met the person I referred to earlier as the third witness, the one who gave evidence against the priest that I couldn't remember being present on the night. Initially, hearing there was a third witness had spooked me a bit. If the third witness was right, my memory was wrong. Equally, if I was right, he was wrong, and to that extent the trial had been corrupted. But as it turned out, the third witness had met the victim elsewhere that night in the dormitory toilets, quote, crying his eyes out. The third witness, now a lawyer, was utterly clear about his memory, and I was in no doubt he had seen what he said. It was another year or so before I caught up with the school captain. That was quite a meeting, let me say. I had seen little of him since leaving school, but during our school days, we had known one another in a reasonably intimate way. We'd lived together for 6 years. So, of course, I asked him, "What was your testimony when we went to court?" Remember, I said that this all began when a boy I called the reporter approached the school captain and me and said a crime had been committed against the boy I called the victim. His memory of the whole event had faded more than mine. Nonetheless, our testimonies corresponded, except for this one respect. The boy I said was the reporter, he said was the victim. And the boy I said was the victim, he said was the reporter. I now see more clearly why some lawyers, particularly judges, are wary of convicting people on testimony that is 30 years old. Get any 8 people who shared a dramatic experience 30 years ago in a room, issue them with pens and paper, and then ask them to record their memory of that distant drama. There will be many discrepancies. Nonetheless, I am satisfied that in the case in which I gave evidence, justice was done. I don't regret giving evidence. My memory of the night in question still replays in exactly the same way in my mind. But the story doesn't end there. The priest went to prison. No one visited him. So my brother Tim did. Not once, but a number of times, writing to him also. As some of you may know, my father Archie was on the Burma Railway, the war crime committed by the Imperial Japanese Army, in which between 100 and 200,000 men died, laying 400 kilometres of track. By the time he got back from that ordeal, the entire Bible, Old Testament and New, had compressed in Dad's mind to 3 lines, which he continued muttering into very old age. Those lines were, "I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you visited me." Some people didn't like my brother Tim going to visit the priest in prison, but I was so proud of him.